Hi, Guy Disney here. In 2009, in southern Afghanistan, the armoured vehicle I was commanding was struck by a rocket-propelled grenade. The projectile hit the armour, burned through the hull of the vehicle, ripped through my lower right leg, and finished its journey in an 18-year-old soldier of mine, killing him instantly. What was left of my leg was amputated, and I now have a below-knee fitted prosthesis on my right leg. Since that event, I've been able to redeploy to Afghanistan on a combat operation, ski to the North and South Poles, and won horse races in the UK, becoming the first amputee to do so. This evening, I would like to try to explain how. Now let's try and lighten the atmosphere a bit after that start. I'm going to talk about the strategy I use. It's used by another far better known Disney, Walt Disney, who's no relation. The Disney strategy is an approach using three thinking styles, which are the dreamer, the realist, and the critic. The dreamer concentrates on ideas, the realist focuses on how to make it work, and the critic identifies the weaknesses in the plan. The combination of these styles reflect my mindset, one that I was fortunate to have the opportunity to enhance whilst in the army. It's not exclusive to me. Most of the teams I've worked with have these skills. The easy part is to dream. Everybody does it. The critic is there to break down every single aspect of a new challenge, always contingency planning, getting feedback from people who have experienced similar challenges, never ever leaving a stone unturned. The critic finds the risks and asks the important questions. Once I've identified these, I then hand it to the realist, who makes me practice, practice, and practice, until the skill required for each task becomes intuitive. This mitigates as much risk as is possible. I've used this strategy in three areas: the military, polar expeditions, and jump racing. I allow the dreamer to formulate the plans, while enabling the realist and the critic to get on with the current focus. Now it's easy, or it's key for you to find other people with experience in the spaces you wish to operate. This empowers your realist and the critic. And importantly, more than one dream can run concurrently, and they can take years to come to fruition at times. So as a young lad growing up, the dream in me wanted to be a soldier. I trained at Sandhurst and did my first tour of Afghanistan in 2009. The military clearly has strategies, and the Disney mantra gels well with a lot of them. A mission is the dream given to me by a superior officer. Then the planning and the execution of the mission is done by the realists and the critics, in this case, my soldiers and myself. We make it happen. I had a unit of 12 men under my command, and we were ambushed. The vehicle I was in was hit by a rocket-propelled grenade, and the consequences of the various attacks that day that produced an almost unmanageable amount of casualties across the rest of the unit. A soldier was killed, and I lost the lower part of my right leg. The realists in my unit quickly came to the fore by applying 2 tourniquets and stopping a major arterial bleed in under 20 seconds, with a comrade and brother-in-arms dead next to them. The critics asked the question of how the team would function without the commander, and they asked the realist to make sure the mission was kept on track and ultimately completed. Now, whenever I replay that day, I do try and analyse what we could have done differently to keep a young soldier alive. I'm not a believer in luck, but I do accept that there are parameters that are outside of one's control. For me, if these happen to conspire against you, that's when you must think dynamically, calling on the realist, and push on, dwelling on ifs, not dwelling on ifs and whys. So post any traumatic incident, some reflection is clearly appropriate. But it is important not to daydream with hindsight. For me, hindsight should be used to learn from, not to fantasize with. The dreamer must always dream looking forward, not backwards. During my recovery phase, my dream was to rejoin my soldiers in Afghanistan, largely fueled by a sense of guilt being home while they were still deployed. Once fitted with a prosthesis, the medical consultants told me that if I wanted to go back to Afghan, I had to complete the mandatory fitness tests. I rationalized that my unit still had 3 months out in Afghan. It would take me a month to get fit. I could get back to them. So I started fitness training. This was the dreamer dreaming, but the realist and the critic not being consulted at all. The dream was dominating the decision-making and ambition. So I started to build up to the 8-mile forced march with 25 kilos on my back. Unfortunately, my stump burst open. I was absolutely exhausted from the training. I was spent. I then engaged the medical team and took on their points much more readily, realizing that a quick return to combat would not be possible in the time frame that I had allocated. I then went back to the realist and the critic, used them to break down what I needed to achieve over a specific time frame to achieve the dream. Failing to achieve the dream quickly was an important step in order to recognize I had to consult with the realist and the critic before going back on deployment. The realist and the critic didn't cancel the dream. They just told it to wait and be better prepared. Another dream was applying from an expedition to the Geographic North Pole. This gave the dreamer, the realist, and the critic a chance to work collaboratively. Once the team of injured soldiers was established, we received numerous outside opinions from the polar community that what we were trying to achieve was impossible. This was actually a good thing. It was important as it helped us get a huge amount of information on what the risks were and how to overcome it by engaging the critic. Once we had identified the hurdles, we could deconstruct them and work out ways to overcome them to keep the dream alive. So the key success factor from my point of view for the expedition was training, endlessly repeating the drills required on a frozen ocean so that when they were needed, they just happened out of muscle memory. Whether that was putting one step in front of another when jolting pains are cursing up your body from the impact of being in minus 40 degrees C, having walked for 10 hours, or force feeding yourself to ensure you're taking on the necessary number of calories for the day to make sure your body is going to keep functioning. Our training consisted of 10 hours a day on our feet, dragging tires to simulate the sledge weighing 90 kilos. The critic in me made sure that my equipment and my drills were up to scratch by asking the realist to practice and practice and practice. One thing I did come up with, which was not great for my mother at the time, is I used to put my prosthetic leg in the chest freezer before training. And I did this to make sure it wouldn't break apart in the extreme cold, but also to get a feel for what it would be like to wear when it was extremely cold or hardened by the cold. Not great when she was going in there for a bag of bird's eye peas. So the team members on the expedition all had similar mindsets, always putting team ahead of self, listening to and balancing the voices of the dreamer, the realist, and the critic. One of the other team members had a paralyzed right arm, a result of a bullet severing his brachial artery. Because of this, I took on the role of tying up his shoelaces, setting up the tent, and cooking. He took on the responsibility of carrying more weight in order to contribute. By doing this, we allowed our realists and our critics to work together. A key part to succeeding was understanding the controllable and uncontrollable areas of the expedition. Controllable, the fitness, robustness to the cold, teamwork. A massive uncontrollable, the ice conditions. On the first day that we deployed, we skied for about 13K and we drifted back south about 14K away from the pole. Yeah, pretty soul-destroying. Wasn't meant to get a chuckle. By completing the expedition, I found that my body was strong enough and robust enough to return to Afghanistan, and then the dream was satisfied. This time it had worked much more collaboratively with the realist and the critic. On another expedition in 2013 to the Antarctic, I shared a tent with one of the most decent human beings I've ever met, a guy called Duncan Slater, who's a double amputee. He and I enjoyed motivating each other when having a challenging day. And one simple action that he took was a fantastic example to me of motivational leadership in challenging conditions. The sledges that we were pulling, they weighed, again, probably about 90 kilos. The tent we slept in weighed about 5 kilos. And this was normally stored in my sledge when we would ski. One morning, while packing up the kit, getting ready to head off, I missed that Duncan had put the tent in his sledge, adding to his workload. I was absolutely fuming, and I asked him, why have you done that, Dunk? And he simply said with a big grin, I beat you today. For the entirety of the expedition, we found ways to help each other out, often making our own workload heavier. It was a case of making personal workloads harder and heavier to contribute to making the team function efficiently. We reached the South Pole in December 2013. So prior to joining the military, I'd ridden as a jump jockey. I reapplied for my racing licence with the hope and dream of getting back in the saddle post-injury. My application was rejected by the racing authorities, and they gave me multiple reasons why I wouldn't be able to race with a prosthetic. This gave the critic the information he needed to put to the realist. So the realist in me then began to neutralise these points. I reached out, established a team, invited external views, either negative or positive, for the critic to analyse, then set about building a robust case to rebut the reasons why they denied me a licence. For me, the excuse of it hasn't been done before is lazy and limits what people can do. It's about taking apart a problem from the inside and out, using our realist to remove the emotion, allowing the critic to help us to be completely objective. The galvanised realist and critic were called upon again by the dreamer to explore how to get back on the racecourse. So it took 5 years of working with exceptional people to realise the dream of winning races and riding over the Grand National fences. The dreamer in me wouldn't let go of the dream, and the critic in the realist had to develop a strategy and persist for the dream to come to fruition. For me, I've used the Disney strategy for my personal endeavours, and I've identified 2 traits which I love to see in the team members that I work with. I like them to embody humility and grit, having the ability to admit when they're wrong, but not when they're beaten. But the critic in me that resides in me objects to any form of give Guy a pat on the back, because quite frankly, it's not just about me. I've mentioned throughout this talk how vital it is to have the team supporting me and helping me realise my dreams, ever critical but realistic in their undying belief. So the Disney strategy of combining the dreamer, the realist, the critic can challenge you, me, anyone to grow and succeed. So I'll leave you with a quote from Walt Disney, who said, "If you can dream it, you can do it." And I agree with that, provided you're prepared to work your arse off, listen, and ask the right questions. Thanks very much.